Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cleanse Healing Night podcast. We have Doc Talk with Dr. Kaiser today. We're not going to talk super deep today and about medicine. Stay to the end because we will be talking about bioregulators. I will be also talking about why my face looks like I swallowed about 18,000 marshmallows in just a moment. But I wanted to first just give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about today. My perspective of Doc Talk is that we're looking at the entire body, the field of our frequency, not just food, not just herbs, not just peptides and bioregulators, but who we are, our soul, our spirit, our mind, our body, all encompasses the trilogy of what I call holistic healing. And everything matters. So you can eat the healthiest food in the world, but really your soul, your spirit is off. You might not be vibing at a high frequency and you're wondering why you're craving toxic foods. It's because your frequency is low. For me, whenever I think about the definition of love, love is truth. Love is justice. Love is freedom. It's sovereignty. And so this is an overarching theme that we're always talking about when we're talking about cleanse your body, heal the root cause, ignite your true inner purpose, and ignite your body's innate healing. I'm also talking about what we're going to be going over today with one of my favorite guests and one of my dear friends, Frank Jacob. This is always a super deep dive. And so if you guys have questions about anything, if you have comments, comment below. And then also share this with everybody. You know, Frank is a very popular, well-followed individual. And because he's like me, he goes super deep into the rabbit holes of spirituality and what really is going on. Today's topic, it's what's really behind the collapse of attraction, roles, and relationship harmony. And this is something I've been wanting to do with him for a long time because about a year ago, I think it was, I was boarding a flight. I was listening to an audio he sent to me over WhatsApp. And I was just like, this topic right now is an epidemic because we are seeing so many men and women dividing. And the answer is, we don't know. And Frank has the answer today, at least in part. Okay. So what we're going to cover is why men and women are struggling to connect and what's happening with the divide. You know, we truly have 75% of marriages ending abruptly these days. We have on, you know, if you're on a dating app, which I publicly announced I was off of them like 3 months ago. I was just tired of it. I was tired of the avoidant behaviors from men. I was tired of the drama and always thinking, God, what did I do again? Why is it that I'm still not attracting that person? And I've had a lot of people say, oh, well, it's something within you. And I'm like, yes, I know it's always in me. But the pool of men and women who are really truly wanting a sacred container type relationship where they're working on themselves and they're reflecting to each other what we have to grow from, to learn from, to see the darkness within. It could be very hard, it could be triggering, it can be challenging, but there are very few people and there are less and less people today who truly want a real relationship. I heard a statistic today that said that the men who are on dating apps, they will swipe 200 times, they'll connect with 10 women, and 9 out of 10 of them will ghost. And they're left with one. And so the dating pool is terrible. It's torturous. And I have what I said to myself, if you guys want to go see my video on this, I was on Instagram. I did like a 15-minute segue where I was out on the beach by myself and I just had all these downloads and I was like, I'm done with this. And I'm ready to just attract what I'm truly embodying within and watch the magic happen. And if I was destined for a partner, then they would show up. If not, I'm going to focus on myself, and not like from a selfish, narcissistic way, but from a self-loving way, and just to truly enjoy my life without feeling this program need to have somebody complete me. And Frank said something on the audio, circling back to that, which was like, there is a program of why men and women are so divided right now. And we're going to talk about it today, you know, the Sophia code. What is Sophia? Who is she? What is it? What is the energy about it? And then why does communication and attraction feel harder than ever between men and women, black and white and everything? There's divisions everywhere. And is this shift natural or is it deliberately engineered? And how do we stay fully human in a world that's going synthetic, if not is almost completely synthetic at this point? We're going to dive into the polarity breakdown, why men and women are disconnected at record speed, the engineered confusion, who benefits from the collapse of masculine and feminine roles, And then modern relationships are failing. Why attraction, partnership, and communication feel harder than ever. And then we're going to talk about solutions, rebuilding connection, what healthy, future ready, masculine, feminine dynamics look like now. The identity overload, how younger generations can stay grounded without losing themselves in narrative chaos. And then Earth as intelligence. What is the Sophia signal and how do we connect to this? We're going to also, after this episode, we're going to dive into, as we usually do, our VIP group, which is just after this, where you can ask Frank anything and you can ask me anything as your doctor potentially about peptides, bioregulators, health, wellness. I call it 11th opinion advice because many of you are getting terrible advice out there from the same engineered, whoever the heck they are out there, the large powers that be that are intending to divide us and to disease us and destroy us, right? So we are focusing on the health here. We're focusing on the lightness. We're focusing on the frequency, the energy, the vibration that could heal you and then heal and attract people around you at that same level. So this is very important. Now, Frank Jacob, his bio, he is an award-winning filmmaker, researcher, and speaker who tracks the hidden storylines shaping human destiny. His work dives into ancient cosmology, plasma physics, megalithic anomalies, and the buried wisdom of early cultures, while confronting the modern forces steering humanity toward digitized identities, AI-driven realities, and a transhumanistic future. Through documentaries, and we're going to share those on the little scrolls below and how you can access those with my coupon code. He has multi-part masterclasses and public talks. I met him personally in Sedona, which is how we connected our first time. And we've had a couple of shows since then you guys can check out on cleansehealignite.com if you want to go back into the archives. Frank exposes where old myths end and new myth making begins. And his work challenges audiences to question the narratives they've inherited, recognize the subtle influences shaping human perception, and rediscover the organic intelligence. We call that the organic timeline versus the synthetic timeline that has always belonged to humanity. In an age of synthetic futures and overlays, Frank advocates fiercely for the human spirit, for you, the listener, my friends, my warriors, inviting audiences to recognize the difference between the organic signal of the earth and the synthetic narratives designed to pull us away from it. At a time when technology seeks to rewrite the human temple, Frank stands for remembering our original design. Now, before I bring him on, I'll tell you guys real quick why my face looks like this. 7 years ago, just briefly, I did my last Botox session. I had only 3. And it poisoned me so bad that for 6 months, I scratched my eyes and my neck and my body until I bled. It took 2 rounds of prednisone to turn everything off. It's a terrible medication. It turns off your immune system, but it was the only thing that could stop the torment. So I did what's called an endo lift. It's a red light therapy facelift, but it's not an actual surgery. It's just a red light surgery or red light. It's like the size of a hair, and they use a red light to re-stimulate collagen in the face. So I'm on day 5 of my healing. And I also did an under eye bluff to fix the damage that Botox caused me. And Paula can show an image of that a little bit later. But anyway, I'm still in my healing journey. I'm going to be sharing that entire progression with you guys because I had a lot of people interested in the procedure, how to do it, how to pick a doctor, how to heal and recover from it very quickly. I'm having stem cell this weekend, as well as I'm doing lots of peptides and bioregulators to help and assist my body to heal as fast as possible to retain my youth because it got destroyed by toxic beauty. Speaking of synthetics, right? So now let's bring on Frank, since we now have the obvious. I'm smiling like a weirdo because I'm recovering from a procedure. And here we have my friend Frank. Welcome to the show back, Frank, for the 3rd one, I think, or 4th one.
Yeah, how you doing, Diane? Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're tuning in from Germany. Is that right now?
That's correct.
Okay. 9. Not 9. That's the only word I remember from when I played professional soccer there in Germany in the Bundesliga. Let's dive in. You know, your title here is consciousness archaeologist, which I love because I've heard you say before, you don't have like these crazy professor accreditations. You're just a seeker. I wouldn't even put the word just there. You're a seeker, you're a researcher, you're a digger, and you like to get to the baseline of truth, which to me is love. So let's dive into like the points that I mentioned earlier. What is the first thing that jumped out from everything that I mentioned in terms of like the men-women divide that you wanted to get started with?
Well, I think the first thing that people should try to understand is that there's there's an ongoing narrative out there in the world right now that is confusing us in terms of our gender, because there's a new definition circulating, which is that, gender isn't something that you're naturally endowed with, but that it's something that you can choose. As you can choose your gender identity, and that your sex, your biological sex, and your gender are two separate things. That's one of the things that's been kind of infused into the narrative on the mainstream channels, I've noticed in the last few years. And I think that's a big contributor. It may not be the only contributor. Of course, this goes back to, you could say, in the United States, I think it was in the 60s and late 60s, early 70s, that the whole idea of feminist rights came into play. And was it Gloria Gaynor and people like that brought in this narrative that, women are equal to men, or women should be entitled to the same role in society as men. And that's been running now for, I guess you could say, the better part of 50 years. And I think the thing is, we've gotten away from the idea that is more ancient, and that men and women worked together in a symbiosis toward something. And now it's like it's become competition. So men and women are competing for the same piece of the pie, right? So, and that's creating sort of a distorted dystopian dialogue. And I would say that that's probably one of the most primal factors that's affecting things, that's been affecting things, that's led to where we are now. And of course, all the new layers that have been added in the last decade, including, the whole transhuman element, the whole LGBTQ element, the whole idea of transhumanism, AI's influence in society, is further pulling us away from kind of this natural symbiosis. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I looked at pictures even too. And I don't know anything for sure. I just get really curious. That's what I love about you too, is these are things that we hypothesize that resonate with us, that feel like truth. They might not feel like truth to you, but to me, what feels like truth is when you look at people who go through chemo and radiation, the first thing to go is their hair, right? And their bald. If you look at the future of what transhumans are, humans merging with technology, they are hairless. They don't have any hair. So I'm looking at the cancer rates right now, and people just who I never would have thought would have jumped into chemo and radiation for their cancer treatments because they've been holistic practitioners like myself for decades. They're jumping into the chemo radiation and they're being told by their doctor, oh, this chemo is non-toxic. Those do not belong in the same sentence. So I look at those things and I go, they want. And I was just listening today at Apple just came out with their version of digital ID for convenience, even though America's not pushing it, but the UK and Mexico and 40 other countries are pushing digital ID. But America will always go through it like it's subtle and make it sound like it's a good thing. And so now that's the obvious push toward transhumanism, is releasing digital ID. And digital ID is one step closer to, we have a chip in our brain. We're being tracked and traced and followed everywhere. And the thing that makes people lose their hair the most is radiation. And that's exactly what all of these wearables and computers and EMF and 5G towers and a chip in your brain will do, is you'll lose your hair and you look like a robot and you can't grow your hair back. We talked about, growing your hair back with bioregulators, but I always talk about blocking factors and building factors. And a big blocking factor, what is causing your hair loss, is this push towards transhumanism and transgender, all of it, anything with trans, except for the word transformation, which I tend to see as a positive thing. That's what feels like truth to me. I don't know what you think about that, Frank, but when we're hairless, then we're like genderless, and there is no masculine feminine coming together to make family, to procreate, to create the next generation of intelligence, of intuition, of imagination. And now we are at the highest infertility rate that we've ever been, by design. And so I believe that all of this is designed to divide us so that we can no longer stick together, and they want us to stay home and save our own life, just like the movie Ready Player One. And yes, Paula is correct. Like our hair is actually antennas to connect us to the creator and to actually download information. I'm sure you could speak on that too, Frank.
Well, I can speak from personal experience.
Right? You have no problems there, Mr. Rockstar.
Yeah, you're hitting on a lot of layers there. Okay, I mean, you're covering really a lot of territory in that last paragraph or two that you were talking about. The idea of the hairless future society. it's not something I really think about too much, but you're actually right. You know, it's funny, you see these pictures of the future and it tends to be that way. And I consider that to be kind of like an idea of behavioral cloning, you know, I call it
Mm.
that. And it's like, you know, if you get people to kind of clone their behavior, they begin to like epidermically, you could say, like with, you know, there's the epidermis and then there's the genetic code, right? And the epigenetics are what kind of affect things from the outside. And it's funny, we just saw Bruce Lipton on the weekend, actually here in Germany, which was cool. And what that's his big thing about, you know, epigenetics, you know, and he was one of the sort of the first people to kind of suggest that the gene code is secondary to the skin, or the outside, the epidermis part of the cell, is actually what decides what the cell will grow into. And that, of course, also has an antenna. In fact, the external part of the cell is like an antenna, and the DNA in our bodies themselves are antennas. So what we think is genes, and what affects, you know, the body's growth, like we think that we are our genes, has been proven to be not true. So what is the DNA tuning into, and what is the cell tuning into? So the idea of this hairless thing, you know, it sort of gives you this idea that the environment is so toxic that, you know, we've lost, you know, we're losing vitality in our bodies, enough vitality to grow hair. So I
Yeah.
think that's the kind of subliminal message, right? So people that are watching, I've noticed this, a lot of dystopian kind of programs on Netflix and Prime, and so there's nothing to watch anymore. I've noticed you can't really even watch those channels anymore because they're so they've become so stunted. They're so you know, there's no power in any of the messages or narratives any longer. It's just this story of you know, kind of impotence.
Mm.
And that's part of this, what I'm talking about with this behavioral cloning. You know, everyone's watching the same shows, everyone's got their mobile in the same position in front of their face when you drive down the street and you pass a bus stop, or if you're, I took a train a couple of weeks ago on my way back from America, you know, just out of the blue I decided to take the train from the airport home, and I had a chance to again watch kind of society, which I like to do sometimes. And I don't stare at my phone. I actually stare at people. I stare at the world. I stare at the outside, and I kind of check it out. Like, where are we at now? What's going
Yeah,
on?
me
And you
too.
just notice everyone's kind of doing the same behavioral cloning. And so this is all part of this, you know, impotence that's spreading in the world. And of course, the idea of trans, you know, is, I mean, I recently got to meet somebody who was transgender, and he made it very clear from the very start that's what he was. And I had to lower my defenses and, you know, allow him as a soul to express himself. And he gave me his book, and I read his book, and, you know, and you can kind of sympathize
Mm.
completely with that soul, because they're caught in this maelstrom of, in the whirlwind of the way society tries to cast us in these roles. And, you know, we're in a transition moment right now between these roles. You know, this idea of provider, protector versus nurturer and supporter, this doesn't really translate clearly into the world any longer, you know. So we have this orientation that's going on around us, and these roles, you know, it's pulling people apart. And so they're trying to, and it's doing a number on our brains. We're trying to figure out, well, what are we? Where do we fit? If we don't fit into the standard cultural narrative that has been taught for the last centuries.
Mhm.
And that role, okay, now, you know, if we want to go back another step further, right, we're talking about, where does this patriarchal role come from? Well, this is something that I've been kind of attacking, or, you know, for maybe a gentler word is questioning, or
Mhm.
let's say deconstructing. And that is this whole patriarchal narrative and where it emerged. And, you know, I trace it back in my in my studies of Gnosticism to about 1850 BC, you know, when the whole Abrahamic concept began to take shape and form. The idea of, first of all, preferential racial designation, and then the God that was then imposed upon Abraham, was an external God, right? It was a God outside, and it was a masculine God, and he was wrathful, and he was full of vengeance and full of hatred. And it set in motion a whole different kind of concept, because up to that point in society, now you have to realize, you know, if you look back in history, we're going back to a time where paganism was much more prevalent. We're talking about a time where, and paganism, of course, is one of those words that's been completely denatured from its original meaning. So people think of pagans and heathens as these sort of primitive, ruthless and barbaric people. But what the pagans really symbolized to me in my research is this balance between the matriarchal society and the belief and the understanding that there was no God outside of us, an extraterrestrial influence which brought a patriarchal inflow. No, the God, if there was such a thing, the divinity they worshiped was a feminine one. And the Gnostics called it Sophia. And that's what you were talking about. The Sophia, the signal of Sophia was very prevalent in those times. And Sophia really is literally, the Gnostics defined her as the earth, the being as the earth. They looked at the earth as a being. So when that whole system was brought in, we're talking like we're going now into 4,000 years, right? So this system has been pushing that patriarchal narrative. So men have become completely disjointed from their original partnership role in symbiosis with females, to become taught and conditioned through religious ideologies and belief structures that are not natural. Nothing that the church brought to us, any of the Abrahamic religions, is natural. It's all like counter nature, right? It's the control of nature. It's to get control of your feelings, of your desires, and all these things are considered to be bad by the religious patriarchs and the church fathers, right? You had to control those natural urges, and this is not natural. It's not natural to control those natural urges, obviously. And so what's happening right now is I think there's a reemergence that's bringing us back into embracing some more of these pagan ideals, even though now I would call them more animistic views of world, whereas we don't look at sort of cause and effect so much in terms of on an egoistic level, but that we embrace the idea that nature itself is a living being, and the earth is a living being, and the life force extends beyond our bodies into the nature and extends from our skin outward into the whole world around us, so that even a gust of wind could be considered an emotional impact that nature is sending you, a signal that Sophia might be sending you to pay attention. These kinds of things are what those cultures, those original cultures that were the ones that built Stonehenge and these amazing monuments that we find, and we're puzzled and clueless as to what they represent. Well, that early primitive society may not have been as primitive as we think they were.
And I wanted to describe, what you sent to me too, which was so interesting, and share a story as well, because I do not consider myself a religious individual. I do love Christian values because I think that the morality of them leads people to be, better humans that are following a roadmap of how to treat each other, right? But I've also seen, Christians that are just bad, if not worse, than people who are atheists, or who just believe generally that they're, or just question what is God, and like, what is it? And I had a conversation with an ex-boyfriend of mine who is very Christian. And I said to him, when we pray, can we pray, when they say God, you hear a lot of people say, especially in Sedona, Father, God, Mother Earth. And I say, I feel that it's exclusionary to say, Father, we thank you. And well, where is the mother in this? And then people always will tell me I'm the Antichrist or something for even questioning it. And I'm like, I don't pretend to know anything. I just like to include both genders. And I see the earth as a feminine. She's a creator, she's a producer, she's a nurturer, she's a provider of the things that we need to be healthy, right? So I want to get into Sophia because I think it's so important to track back and trace back our roots. You are going into it now, and I want to share a paragraph that you sent to me. Like you said, many ancient seers described the earth as a living intelligence they named Sophia. In time before the reckoning of time, in the long prelude to the prehistory of the human species, male shamans were born from women who were trees. Who were these shamans? They were the first men of the human race. For at the beginning of time on this planet, all the male members of our species were shamans, who, for me, I look at shamans today and the ones that I work with as the true doctors. I am humble around them. I've had the best transformations in ayahuasca ceremony or tepescuita I don't go in there just to escape. I go in there to see the things that I've never seen that I need to unsee and then reprogram. So I get out of the programming that I have been, of course, like all of us, been programmed since birth, right? So these shamans, they were accomplished hunters who came from elsewhere in the cosmos, yet they belonged to the earth in a way they could not at first understand. In effect, they came to their home planet without knowing it was their home planet. A strange and bizarre situation. This, it sets for the stage for the I don't know what this means, but
The Chthonian romance you're talking about.
yeah, exactly. It refers to the underworld, the infernal religions or regions. So how does this idea of Sophia, being the earth and the men being the shamans, from trees, how does this idea help people make sense of their own place in the world today, in relationships, and maybe their struggles with their partnerships, even if they don't know the deeper mythology behind it? If you want to run with that, because I know there's so much beautiful things that you have to say about Sophia, intrigues me.
Well, I guess the first thing that people can take into consideration is that the idea of a narrative, that is a creation narrative, that again is separate from the one I was mentioning about, that emerged in the Abrahamic religions. And a lot of people just sort of, they're either atheists, they don't believe that there's any God or whatever, or for the most part, the majority and dominant religious belief systems in this world are based on the Abrahamic belief system, the three, Muslim, Christian, and Judea, right? So they essentially all repeat the same pattern, and they are all rooted in the same structure. But what many people don't believe or don't understand is that there's another creative narrative which preceded this. And that narrative was such a big threat to this patriarchal system that they did whatever they could to eradicate any traces of it. And that is the hidden Sophianic narrative. And that has to do with the creation of our world from a place at the center of our galaxy, which the Gnostics called or referred to as the pleroma. And I find it's very interesting because I'm not just interested in mythology, but I'm also always interested in science or science or emerging or new scientific um, recognition in terms of plasma, in terms of the electric universe. And when you start to embrace those other ideas, you realize that what these Gnostic shamans were talking about. And I'll just add one thing about the shamans, and to what you were saying, is that shamans are people that step into direct contact with these paranormal realms. They're like the ones in the tribe or in society who are authorized or have made themselves authorized to become qualified to experience these altered states of consciousness and basically go into contact with the nature spirits. And the original narrative about Sophia emerged in a similar way from the shamans they were called the Telestai. And they literally emerged, we trace them to about 6,000 BC, and they began to enter in this dialogue with the planetary animal mother, Sophia herself. And that's how this whole narrative emerged, about that there is this center of the galaxy called the pleroma, in which these energy plasmas live, these plasmic torrents live, if you will. And if we can really directly tie that to the emerging plasma cosmology, that in fact there are these plasma torrents that are running through the entire universe. We've now realized that no, the universe isn't empty vacuum space run by gravity, but it's actually electrically charged, and it's filled with plasma, and the plasma is basically broken into several states. And some of this can be identified as what they call Birkeland currents, which are lines. So they call it the cosmic web, and they've taken sort of radioscopic pictures of it, and they show us that there's this amazing web of plasma that extends all the way outward from our planet, from our bodies, to the center, and emerges in all of the galaxies. And at the center of our galaxy is this most potent plasmic energy. So the idea that there be these entities that live at the center of the galaxy, it might sound like science fiction at first, right? But the crazy part is that scientists here on Earth in laboratories have already proven in experiments that plasma acts like it's conscious. And if you give it enough energy and you put it into a certain situation, and you add these, like what they call dusty plasma crystals to it, they form crystalline structures which have the ability and the capacity to arrange themselves in a way that allows for memory and for data to be stored. So
Mm.
not a far cry to think, or like an extrapolation to think that if we have a conscious plasma in a laboratory, that if we expand that out to a galaxy-sized plasma energy at the center of our galaxy, that these could indeed be very, very powerful intelligences, millions of times more powerful than any artificial super intelligence will ever reach in terms of their scope and understanding of the cosmic forces and the stored memory, which is embodied in all of the ether, which is another word for plasma, by the way. So the story that these shamans, these telestai, discovered was that there was two beings, and they were gendered. These plasmas are gendered, at the center, and they actually came up with an experiment. And this is what and they call them aeons, these creatures, these divine cosmic torrential energy. They look at them as dragons. So whenever you see a serpent or a dragon in any kind of mythology, this is actually the hidden, lost traces to represent Sophia. And so Sophia and her partner Thelity, they had this experiment which they called the Anthropos, and that is kind of our root, our genome. And they literally released it into the arms of the galaxy. And this is kind of what they do. It's their mandate to play, to create, just to see what happens, And so they created this idea of us, and they sent it out there. And after several failures, Sophia became so enthralled in trying to figure out what's going on, according to the information that these Gnostics were able to pull out of their direct contact, is that she literally fell out of this center, out of the pleroma, and entered the experiment herself, which was unprecedented. Long story short, and you can listen, if you're interested in these stories, I highly recommend you check out my webinar. My last two webinars go deeply into that. I try to bridge that into not just mythology, but try to tie it into reality around us, the real world experiences around us. But the long story of it is that she ends up, converting, tumbling and spinning and gathering molecules and atoms out of the dusty plasma and turning into the planet. And so here we have this cosmic divine energy that has the code of us in it. And so the first thing that happened in the course of her evolution, of the genesis, let's say, of the planet growing, was that out of her body literally first formed, the land masses, and she contained the DNA code and all these other codes in the salt, which is kind of interesting, which is the salt water, the oceans. And when she finally materialized enough matter around us, the first creatures that emerged were women. And this is sort of tying into what you introduced earlier in the conversation. So it was actually the women who first emerged in the planetary body of Sophia, and it was less of a copulation experiment where man and woman get together through the birth canal, we come into the world. No, it was more of a mycelium type of experience where they literally took shape, and the first shapes they took were kind of part of the dream. And this is another element of the telestai's version of creation, is that Sophia is dreaming us. So in a way, it's like we have these qualities of dreaming and creating. That's how we create. We dream it, we visualize it, we create it. So this is no different than what Sophia was doing. She dreamed us, and she dreamed the feminine energies into the world. And so the first thing they were trees, they were amazing shapes, they were land masses, and gradually they began to form into complexer and complexer creative ideologies and forces and creatures. And this all happened way before the human element, the man element, even entered the planet. Now, why didn't the man element enter the planet at the same time? Well, that's also part of this creative narrative, this creation narrative, which emerged in the course of that whole process from her falling out of the pleroma and becoming the planet. But here again, just to get to the point, the male genome was kind of tore apart from the female genome when Sophia went through this turbulent process of becoming the Earth. And eventually what happened is the males were sort of stranded in an area called M42, which is a planetary incubator, you could say. Even science, you can look out, actually, you can go out into a clear night sky and you can see the constellation of Orion and this cluster, which they talk about as the planetary incubator. And so they were sort of lodged there, and they were developing there independently at first. But as it would be, naturally, they were drawn to their feminine counterpart. And so they followed, not, like in the Bible, they've kind of mutated those words to be called bloodlines. They talk about the bloodlines of the kings, and whatnot. But these are kind of a twist off of the actual scientific way of describing Birkeland currents. They followed the lines of the plasma, and they followed the charge that led them actually to the planet. And so when they first appeared here, they were more nebulous, they were more plasmic, and they were, they were not really integrated with the females for a long, long time. But they witnessed them, and the females took note of them, and gradually they began kind of this dance between one another that eventually led to more and more merging of the two, to the point where the woman of the planet essentially gave the men certain mandates that they had to follow, because the men were kind of going out of control, hunting everything that was moving. And the women said, nope, can't do that. Got to fix that problem. So literally what happened is that, and this is all interesting because it's all in Greek mythology. It's reflected in many of the myths of the world. But eventually what happened is that the men combined or merged with the trees, or hid in the trees, and the tree. And so that it's said that the first man, the first human, emerged out of a tree. And this is something that I show in my last masterclass about how, this is reflected in some of the Greek mythology, how you can see the birth of a man coming out of a tree, right? Like Adonis and stuff, right? So essentially this is all reflected in mythology. So there you have kind of like a very condensed and rough version of the idea of the way the masculine and feminine element of the human anthropos, the genome of humanity, formed over long, long periods of time on the body of Sophia. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, and I want to pull it into today, because it's so beautiful the way it's described. And it's also, if we look at all of these ancient civilizations, there's what some would call as like the true goddesses of different eras, right? Like we have Sedona, what many people would refer to as a different timeline, a different crash. What's it called again? Why am I forgetting right now what Sedona was? It was anyway, it was one of the ones where the water swept it away, Atlantis. And then there's a whole bunch of other women being referred to, divine or on divine assignment now. And so there's a lot of people who I know that are really practicing divinity and truly looking for their counterpart. And so I want to, bring this into the people who maybe these ideas are a bit esoteric for them, but how to apply it now. So people who are out there truly looking, for their counterpart, or want to attract their counterpart, but are feeling very discouraged because they're out there and they're seeing people who are dopamine addicted, or confused about their gender, or who are hiding or avoidant. We've lost the true definition of energy and spirit of divine male and divine female, right? So I wanted to ask what your thoughts were now, Frank, of what we can do, what people can do who are listening today, including myself, because there's a lot of inversion happening and interference of, they want, like, the apps, they don't want us to come together. That's very, very clear. They don't want us to procreate. That is beyond clear. If you're listening to this right now and you don't think so yet, then you got to dig some deeper to see that the plan is to keep us divided and confused. So, like, how would it be, using a lot of these Greek mythology and true history, how can we cultivate an essence of self to truly attract and cultivate our divine counterpart, so that we're, in completion? Because men and women, we have different, we carry complementary strengths, almost like two sides of larger design. And if we're not completing one another, and I don't believe that we complete one another, that we complement and we rise together. But do you think that the complementary forces still matter today? Because a lot of women have become more masculine, a lot of men have become more feminine. We're kind of completing ourselves. But so I wonder what we can do if we truly want to, like, for me, I want to drop a lot of this masculinity and having to lead and having to do everything myself. And a lot of the men are like, I'm having to be, maybe for their children, a lot more, in their feminine role, or they're having to be softer, they're confused about how they're supposed to be because of, cultural, let's say cultism on social media, and being programmed to, oh, how dare you, you're so insensitive. Everybody's confused. So how do we come together, and how do we attract, and how do we go back to that organic timeline to truly attract one another and to get along again and to come together, like in a true divine partnership?
Well, I would say that one of the first things you should ask yourself, as a man or a woman, is if you've outsourced your identity to some cultural narrative. and that applies really to both sides, because where are you getting where are you, what are you identifying with, what is the source of your identity in terms of your body? Like, are you in your body? Do you feel your body? Do you know what your body is capable of doing, or what it's capable of feeling? We've become so numbed out, like you mentioned it. So many people are unfortunately, they're taking the wrong kinds of mind altering substances or body altering substances as a way to escape, because they can't find themselves, because I think a lot of it is that they've outsourced their identity to these cultural narratives. So one of the first things you should do is ask yourself if you've done that. Have you outsourced your identity to a cultural narrative? Or are you deeply in tune with your feminineness or your masculineness, right? And that makes you, you know, not really like polarized necessarily, but it's about being authentic. So you would learn the difference between authenticity and just reaction, right? So a lot of people in the world, you could say, identify themselves or define themselves by what they're opposing, not by what they actually are. So this is important, right? Because if we're in a constant battle with society around us in terms of the narratives, because we've decided we have to fit into one of those narratives, then we're kind of, we're being led into a place that isn't really cohesive with our own internal connection to who we really are. Um, you know, Polarity and understanding polarity doesn't mean hierarchy, man over woman, or, stronger over weaker. It means synergy. That's really what polarity means, the synergy between the masculine energy and the feminine energy. And this is what these ancients were kind of practicing. They were practicing this synergy where, women had a different role in society. Women have because women were here first, women developed an affinity to the earth energies, the Undinis and the water spirits and the mermaids and all these legends we've heard about. These are all leftover remnants and traces of the fact that women really embodied the earth for a long, long time before men ever got here. And this is why maybe this can help explain why the feminine energies have this connection to these more organic intelligence, more earthbound intelligences, more, connected to the cycle of the moon, for example. Like, women are very, very connected to the cycle of the moon. And the moon's been given a lot of bad bashes, let's face it. I'm part of that. I made films and talked about the moon not being real or haven't been brought here. And there's other authors out there that are putting out books about it. And that it's a machine and that it's controlling us and stuff. But actually, what you find out from the creative narrative, the creation narrative of Sophia from the Telestai, is that Sophia gave birth to the moon. That was the first thing she did. And the moon came out of her body as a form of vanity mirror which showed her reflection. So she embodied the earth and became this dense form. But what the moon reflected is the light from the pleroma. It's the organic light. And it was there for her as a reminder of who she was. And the moon gradually, over long, long periods of time, this is also something that I get into a lot in my last masterclass, is the idea of the moon emerging from her body, and that it wasn't always in the position that it was in. The moon actually was someplace much closer than it is now, and it's been growing further and further distant from the earth. But in the course of its evolution of coming out of the earth to where it is now, it became a kind of timekeeper. And the first humans as women that were connected to the moon, therefore, are women. That's why I believe women's cycles are so deeply connected with the moon. And another thing is, I think that, probably the most fulfilling relationships arise then when both partners grow into their individuality in terms of their polarity, if you want to call it that, their sexual polarity, when they recognize that they're part of a larger human design, that the human design includes both of those, that they're not complete without the other. That's why the men came from Orion looking or feeling, let's say, their way toward the feminine aspect of the genome, because they weren't complete. And so when they got here, and the Chthonian romance that I jumped in and talked to you about when you were trying to say that word, is really this process of man and woman finding their way into this synergy that they live together, right? So this, of course, is still ongoing. So when we talk about Genesis, for example, in the Bible, that, God, the man, made the earth in how long? 7 days, right? So, right, and he made man to have dominion over all the animals and blah blah blah, right? Well, all these narratives were totally maligned off of these original root narratives, which the Gnostics came forward to contest 2,000 years ago when the church was solidifying. And that's why they literally banned anything to do with the Sophianic mysteries. All their schools, the mystery schools, were destroyed, burned down. The libraries were burned down, like Library of Alexandria and many others. And the only traces that we actually have of the existence of this amazing ancient culture was found in 1945 in Nag Hammadi, which we now call the Nag Hammadi Codices, which preceded the Dead Sea Scrolls by about 2 years, or you could say a year and a half. And isn't it interesting that the one narrative which supports the Sophianic mysteries and the connection of humanity to the body of Earth emerged after thousands of years at, within 2 years as the other narrative, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which embodied the patriarchal, the Redeemer concept, the Savior, the God outside of ourselves, the humans as sinners, that we're stuck here in a planet we have to get out of, right? This emerged parallel at the same time, and both of those cultures actually lived in Qumran, in the Dead Sea area. So the one was spying on the other, right? So it's very, very interesting when you look back at that, which essentially is telling us that this idea of Genesis took 7 days, where, well, the pagan, this other telestai creation myth is telling us that Genesis is ongoing. So the Chthonian romance, the idea that men and women find their synergy, is not over. We've had phases, you could say, in cultural times of the past, of the ancient past, where there was more of a balance. You could say there were times where the feminine was more powerful, the matriarchal was more powerful. And what did it do? It created a counter pendulum movement of the patriarchal side coming back. So what we're in the process of doing right now is we're still in the middle of this Genesis act, and we're trying to find a way to bridge these two together. So I think that would be a good place where you could kind of tie in the ancient mythology into the ongoing modern narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love how you say it's still ongoing, because my perception of time is that the present, the past, and the future is all happening right now, and it's all converging into one another. And when we look at the future, there's fear. When we look at the past, there's shame, and it's all been programmed to be that way.
Yeah.
It's all also programmed, and creates this PTSD, and then people are afraid to even engage in partnerships again because of what's happened before. But what frequency that you were operating from, and what belief systems or programs or whatever, like I call them the top 10 prison bars, and we've talked about that in our show several times, Frank. It's like anything that is, when you're pedestalizing anything outside of yourself, whether it's a pastor, a preacher, a politician, your parents, things that you learn in school from professors, pop culture, your peers, all of these things create these programs that I believe are the true viruses, that mind viruses that keep us stuck, sick, and suffering, and trapped into this transhumanistic paradigm where it's like, well, this is going to happen no matter what, or like, I might as well just do the digital ID out of convenience, or everything's so hard. So it's like, I believe if you're in the now moment, if you could leave your past in the past, look at it like a lesson, and look at it like, this is how I was acting out of a false paradigm, a false program, a synthetic alteration and syndication of mutation of how we're really here to be and operate from true soul divinity. And the man women completion, I still believe in, and I know for myself, I said, you know what, I don't want to believe in any of this bullshit anymore. I'm tired of even having fear for my past and bringing that into my present, and having any more anxiety about the future or the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to drop all of that. I'm just going to go into my own divinity. I don't admittedly know a lot about Sophia and the frequency, but you always intrigue me when I leave you messages. I'm like, Frank, what the hell is going on? Like, and I'll share with you, the dating world is so weird, and men are weird, and you're like, and you're echoing, well, this is the reason why. And so that's why we're having this conversation today, because I'm speaking for a lot of people who are speaking the same language. Like my brother's going through a terrible divorce. He's very sad. He's, it's just like many people. I'm not just saying about my brother. This is many people getting out of marriages that failed. it didn't feel, it was a lesson. If you could look at it like that, reframe it like that, and shift who you are and attract differently based on the knowingness that you've been lied to most of your whole life about these false paradigms about how relationships should be, which are very codependent, which are, very anxious or avoidant attached. And it just is all over our shit, right? We can, if you drop all of that and get into your true, like, not just about who do I need them to be, it's also who could I be for them, not in like a codependent, I'm going to save you, savior complex, because that's happening a lot right now with men.
Right.
Savior
The savior
complex.
complex is something which is deeply tied to the transhuman, movement in the world. So, I
Yes.
think, just to kind of sum it up, I would say that we're moving in the new world, as you want to call it, Earth 2.0, whatever people call it. I look at it as we're moving toward partnerships that are built on a mutual purpose, not just roles, right? The role of the woman, it's about mutual purpose and finding what that is. And the most successful relationships today are the ones where each partner is kind of rooted in their own identity and still united by some kind of a shared mission or creative direction. And this ties us back into, less about who does what, and it's more about what are we building. There's a
Mhm.
shift from this duty-based partnership to a purpose-based partnership. That's where I think it's going. And this is a kind of idea that brings about a polarity that is healthy, where each person amplifies the other person rather
Mhm.
than compete with them. And
Yes.
I think we need to get to that place if we want to get to a healthy planet. And because look at the planet around us, it's full of all this dysfunction, just from a political level, from a personal level, from a relationship level. And a lot of it, of course, the Gnostics blamed it on the archons. We're probably not going to have time to go on that now, but the archons are this kind of malware which was infused into the human consciousness behind the dopamine circuits of the brain. And so, the reward punishment of, of the human brain. What better way to manipulate consciousness in humanity than to insert yourself there and try to run people as a program? And, if we look at AI, I mean, it's a program, it's a mirror. AI is a mirror of humanity, and humanity is getting lost in the mirror, and they're beginning to be mesmerized by the fact that the mirror seems like it's something creative on its own, but when it isn't, it's actually just a mirror of humanity's accomplishments. And that's something that's very, very important. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. More,
Yeah, I would love to get into more of this in our VIP group, you guys. So I'm gonna cut Frank loose for now, because I mean, this is obviously, this is a story, this is a tale, this is mythology that we want to use to support the now version of you, so that you can find your version of truth that feels good for you, so that you feel good. If you don't feel good, no one feels good. And it's relationship dynamics. I think everybody wants love, everybody wants to be with somebody who loves them, and everybody wants something to love. And it's been taught to us in such an unhealthy paradigm, through religions, through many other things. And so I think the next version of this conversation, part two, is going to be in the membership group. So if you guys want to join us, we just put Frank's links below, dianecasia.com/cyberhive. Use Dr. Diane for 5% off of any of his courses or his videos through November 30th. Today is November 19th. And join us in the VIP group. We're going to have a more conversation with Frank where you can ask him anything. And I'm telling you, if you're somebody who is, deeply Christian and you're triggered by this, I still think you should come. I mean, anything that triggers you could be something that transforms you. And I think that it's just more important to say, you can have certain values and certain things, but still be looking for other versions of truths that could have shaped your version of reality. So I think for relationship counseling, join us with Frank, in the VIP group, which is dianecasia.com/VIP. I'm going to turn Frank loose now so he can go into our Zoom room. And then I'm going to finish off with a few bioregulators that I think could be very helpful for you guys to get into your intuition and your pineal gland again, because that has actually been poisoned by a lot of things like chlorine and heavy metals and things that really have taken us away from our deep understanding of who we truly are. So Frank, we'll see you on the other side in the VIP group. You guys, if you're thinking about it, again, we put the link below. You get it for $1 for your first week. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes here talking about some bioregulators. And if you guys want to talk more about peptides, bioregulators, how we can, bring you back to a higher level of frequency as a quick bridge to bring you back to your intellect, your imagination, your intuition, your insight, this is what you're going to listen to, because it might help you better understand when you have some of these bioregulators. So thank you, Frank, for being on the show today. If you guys are not joining us, share this episode with everybody that you know. Frank is a deep, deep dive. And you're going to find a lot of his other teachings extremely impactful on just shifting. Even one change of thought can be a miracle that unlocks something deeper for you that might be your next miracle that you attract into your life. So thanks, Frank, for being here today. We'll see you in the VIP group. All right, I'm gonna shift over to my slides here. So I prepared a few things for you guys, which I'm really excited to share because this is something that many people are completely unaware of as it pertains to what is possible for us. You know, if you really, really want to shift how you see the world, and also many of you are like, I don't dream anymore. I don't know like how to follow my intuition. I used to, but I feel so disconnected. I had a show that I had with Nick Andrews a few weeks ago where he talked about what are bioregulators, and basically they're tiny peptides in capsule form. So if you've thought about injections before and you've just been like, you know what, I can't do injections because I'm afraid of needles, this is a great place to start, especially also if you are somebody who's very sensitive to supplements or things and you feel like you want a more gentle start into peptides. You know, peptides, reminder, we make 30,000 of them a day. 8,000 to 30,000 a day, depending on who you talk to and listen to. But your body already makes them, but we are not able to make them as much because of what we call the shit, the stress, the hormone imbalances, the xenoendocrine disruptors that look like hormones, and the infections and the toxins. So all of that is going to block your pineal gland, which is the seat of your intuition. You know, there's reasons why cultures have the pineal gland shape all over, you know, sculptures and their temples. So the pineal regulator is the star of the show today. I'm going to share some actual science and statistics on this in a moment, but I just wanted to bring your attention to this. It's something that has been helping me dream deeper, bigger, better, and has helped me just really go, oh, okay, that's correct. My intuition, I'm able to hear it more deeper now, and it's kind of come back on board, which is so important in an era where information is just taking over and we don't know what to believe anymore. So that's really important, is your intuition coming back on board. There's also one that if you're thinking about doing a bit of everything, because we do have some stacks. There's one that's called the central nervous system bioregulator. There's the pineal. And then there's also the blood vessel one. I'm going to get into that in a moment. But this is called the Nootropic Kickstart Bundle to reclaim your mind. And what I say, your intuition, your imagination, your intellect, and your insight. Your central nervous system runs everything. 90% of the population is running a program of stress 90% of their life, of their days. And they are grabbing for coffee or things to give them energy. When really, if your nervous system was more calm, then you would be able to attract the things into your life that from a calm state. And people want calm in partnership and relationship. They don't want stress. I know this because I've done this. I push people away when I get stressed and my nervous system was on high and I had low cortisol. And that meant that my adrenals were suffering, my thyroid was suffering. So your nervous system drives whether or not you have autoimmune disease or not. It drives if you're in a calm state, if you're in a stress state. If you're living in a stress state, which like I mentioned, 90% of the population is living in 90% of the time, then the nervous system bioregulator will help to regulate that and calm you down, but you'll still be able to be productive and effective. In fact, you'll be even more effective if you actually have your pineal gland that's back in harmony, which is exactly why that is in this bundle. And then blood vessel bioregulator helps your body to actually move the blood flow and the chi and life force through your body. So it's a full stack. So this is a very popular one. If you go on the website, dianecase.com/Promethean, use Chi Ministry for 10% off, you'll see that when you buy in bundles like this, you get a significant discount. Then when you use my coupon code, you get an even bigger discount. So this makes it really affordable for everybody. And it's in capsule form, so it's much easier. Speaking of men and women, if you want to recapture your youthful manhood and your man, we have bundles for men, which includes the blood vessel bioregulator, the prostate, and the testes bioregulator. This is a 30-day supply of everything that you need to help regain morning erections. Not for me, but of course I would like my man to have that. Increase hardness and feel more youthful. And we actually talked about this a few episodes ago, that I think it's now a third of men can't even get an erection, and their testosterone levels are that of people that in their 20s and they're in their 50s. I mean, it's insane. And how can we procreate this way? How can we have sex? How can we come together? The greatest oxytocin production, which is the love hormone, the connection hormone, the creation hormone, is when we have sex. And when we have, for men, when they have an orgasm, and you have to have an erection in order to really have an orgasm, right? And in order to play and have beautiful sex and come together and reconnect and build love, we need this back. So this is a really powerful manhood stack that is going to help with many things like restoring hormonal levels, stimulating testosterone, and regaining that male swagger. Because many people are like, oh, let's just go get more testosterone. That's not the answer. What we do with bioregulators is restore your body's ability to make your own testosterone again, so you need it exogenously from the outside. I can speak to this. I love these bioregulators. They don't overstimulate. They just bring you back to what it feels like in your 20s. So this comes with a 60 capsule stack. It's basically a 1 month supply, and we recommend that you do the stack once a year. Same thing for women. This is going to help you, the female vitality bundle, recapture your female sexuality now, with balancing hormone levels, estrogen levels, and regaining your mental acuteness. And you're going to get the blood vessel bioregulator, also the ovary bioregulator, and the pineal bioregulator. Same thing. You take it twice daily for 30 days, super easy in capsule form, and you do this once a year. Here's the actual science on it with pineal bioregulators. It supports intuition, sleep longevity, and your melatonin rhythm reset. Melatonin is not just a sleep hormone. It is your anti-inflammatory hormone while you rest. It helps you sleep, it helps you stay asleep, and it helps you repair. It helps you remember. So when you're taking this specific hormone, or I should say bioregulator that supports your hormones, it resulted in studies in a 28% reduction in all-cause mortality and long-term follow-up of adults receiving pineal peptide therapy. It was a 2 times lower cardiovascular related mortality risk compared to controls. And it's been shown to improve circadian rhythm, which directly ties to melatonin, intuition, emotional regulation, and dream state processing. If you're not dreaming, then what are you doing? Your dreams are so important. They could help you complete the past and create the future by cultivating a balance in the now. And then also, it improved cognitive function in offspring exposed to prenatal stress, showing significant neuroprotection and memory enhancement, which demonstrates protection against oxidative stress, which is the number one cause of disease. Oxidative stress is not the root cause, it is the result. And that is the key factor in aging-related brain decline. And why this matters for intuition is the pineal gland regulates melatonin, circadian rhythm, emotional clarity, and deep dream state cognition. And studies show that restoring the pineal peptide signaling improves pattern recognition, cognitive integration, emotional processing, which many people need today. Many people are living in PTSD right now, and sleep-based memory consolidation. We have a lot of patients and members we work with who say, this happened to me in my past. I had PTSD from this. I was raped. I was molested. I had a terrible relationship. I was beat, whatever it is, you guys. I was cheated on. I was abused. I was left alone. I was abandoned. This helps you to restore that so that you forget the bad and you can literally procreate the good. Studies and statistics on nervous system bioregulators. This is for brain repair, central nervous system resilience, mood stability, and cognitive power. Clinical studies show that it helps restore central nervous system function after 1 to 10 years of chronic disease and degeneration. And this is huge. At the 10-year mark is where people are starting to see, disease, especially autoimmune disease, begins 10 years before it's actually diagnosed. So we're going to try to cut you off on the path from getting MS or Parkinson's or Hashimoto's or fibromyalgia, many things that people are struggling with today. You're not destined for it. It's not just your genes. Your brain needs help. Your nervous system needs calming. And this is shown to increase the brain's safety margin, meaning more resilience, adaptability, and stress tolerance. Right now, everybody that I know is on stress. They can't handle stress. They have no stress tolerance. And once I started taking these bioregulators, I felt a calm in me that was like, whatever, stress. I'm not going to let it take me down. And so anyway, it's going to help you improve memory, attention, and cognitive function in studies. And it demonstrated acceleration in brain recovery after injury or stress-related damage. The key takeaways is better focus, faster mental recovery, more stable mood and stress response, and stronger neuroplasticity. And the last one, and this is the staple of every bioregulator stack I put every patient on or recommend to our members, blood vessel and circulation bioregulators. This is chi. This is the life force that flows through you. Microcirculation, vascular repair, energy, faster healing, especially if you took the jab or especially if you've been around somebody who has, or if you're sleeping with them, you're swapping fluids with them. These bioregulators are shown to support restoration of vascular wall integrity, especially after age-related microcirculation decline. And it also improves nutrient and oxygen delivery by optimizing capillary function, which enhances whole body healing, energy, and detoxification. Remember, people who air quotes had COVID, their oxygen levels were super low. They were put on a vent, and most people died from that. What if you could actually improve your oxygen delivery, nutrient uptake, and circulation with just a bioregulator? What if we could have avoided all of this crap, right? So this is really coming back home to what can we do to restore our body and help to heal ourselves naturally and holistically instead of allopathically. This is often used, this bioregulator, this blood vessel bioregulator, in protocols for varicose veins, neuropathy, slow healing, hypertension, and metabolic defense. And so I wanted to just share with you guys, again, I'll finalize here, dianekaiser.com/Promethean. They are incredible partners. We had Nick Andrews talk about this in the VIP group, but I'll share it with you right now, that what he talked about was sourcing. The cattle that they're using to source these bioregulators they're the only ones that I know that are doing this. They are actually using cattle that have not been fed or poked or jabbed or hormonally castrated or prescriptioned with a lot of synthetics. So they don't have all of the same, the DNA altering, the RNA mutating technology that a lot of these other supplement companies do or peptide companies do. When you hear the term peptide, it doesn't mean the same thing across all fronts. Many people using the term peptide and thinking that they're taking collagen peptides and they can call it a day. Not even close. So what we do in the ministry is we help you guys specialize on the very things at the very top between Limitless and also Promethean. We're giving you the highest quality with the lowest amount of risk and also the most effective and the most cost prohibitive. They're not expensive. And so they've been around the longest. And I can tell you safely that I've used these things myself and we're seeing like massive, massive game-changing results in our patients. So we want you to remember your intuition, your imagination, and your intention. Who are you? What did you come here to do? And how can you make that happen? And how can you take your dreams and your deep state while you're actually resting and bring those dreams into reality and let go of your nightmares? Cut the tethers from the prison bars and actually create and procreate the life that you came here for as a man and woman complete, as we've been designed for. So anyway, I'm going to go jump into the VIP group, you guys. I really hope that you found the takeaways at the end here with the bioregulators to be supportive. The more that you can actually reactivate and reawaken your brain, the more things we talk about on the show will make sense and you will take action. So sometimes people are like, well, gosh, you're talking about these things that I don't know. They're a little esoteric for me. You can grasp them when you can get back to your dream state and your intuition. Imagine if you could actually remember how to trust yourself instead of learning to trust your doctor or trust the science or trust whatever anybody says. And if it doesn't feel right for you, that is your body saying no. And you can confidently say, that's not for me. And you can walk away without shame or fear or regret or any question that it wasn't the right decision for you because you remember again, because your brain is back on board. So people are struggling with memory and brain fog and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, especially need these bioregulators. But if you want to dream again and your resting state and your waking state, consider these bioregulators. Or if you're a man wanting your manhood back, or if you're a woman wanting her womanhood back, there's stacks for that too. But the nootropics bundle is a great place to start if you just want your brain to come back on board. And then you could do the hormone stack for men. And then if you're a female, you could do that one right after. That is my recommendation. So I'm Dr. Diane Kaiser. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I'll see you in the next episode. And for now, I'll see you in the VIP group. If you'd like to join us, ask me, ask Frank anything. It's dianekaiser.com/VIP. Thanks again for being here. And we will see you next week. Bye for now. Be well. And remember, you have the intuition to make your own decisions. It's just about reactivating it again. See you soon.